You know, when I was a boy, I didn't really know my father. I grew up in Sydney, and I lived there until I was 13 years old. And my dad was one of these men who, growing up, he had this pretty good job in Sydney, and he'd be gone before I got up in the morning when it was still dark. He'd come home in the afternoon again. It'd probably be still dark. It was around 6 o'clock at night. And so, you know, I didn't really get to know this person at all. To me, he was just this cranky man that I got to see on the weekends. Usually did the lawn, and other than that, you just steered clear of him because you didn't want to get in his way. He might say something to you. And, you know, I went through this whole life and just wondering, actually, who is this particular person? Unbeknownst to me at the time, when I was around about 11 years old, my father had been going to the doctor and he had high blood pressure. And the doctor was been saying to him, look, it's getting worse and worse. You've got to get out of the job you're in. It's too high stress. You've got to do something with your life. You know, make sure you have a change here. You've got to address it, or else you're going to have a heart attack and you're going to die. So when I turned 13, Mum and Dad just said, hey, we're moving. And I was like, oh, this is good. Well, we were in the western suburbs of Sydney near Parramatta, and we ended up moving to this beautiful little country gold mining town called Gympie. And so, just out past the south side there at Langshaw, right down the bottom of this valley, Mum and Dad ended up buying this house with 5 acres there. For me, this was absolutely brilliant. You know, this is fantastic. This was an adventure land. I'd been through this whole process, you know, growing up and just houses everywhere. I always looked at books, looked at farms. I loved animals. I just wanted this life, and all of a sudden, this life was mine. That first Christmas was a real eye-opener for me. Because what I ended up discovering is this old man, who I thought was a real cranky person, wasn't too bad, actually. He was actually pretty funny. Not just that, I noticed he had the same sense of humour as me. You know, he was quite a jovial person. And it's really interesting, you know, he's the sort of person that would laugh like if you hurt yourself, rather than actually asking if you're all right. He would laugh at it, especially if it was something stupid. And I did a lot of stupid things when I was a kid, I can tell you right now. It's funny because now I laugh at my kids for doing stupid things. But he ended up turning out to be quite this jovial person. He had quite this dry sense of humour, and, you know, I really got to know him. I really enjoyed being around him. And it was a real surprise for me. The first day I went to school in Gympie, I went to Gympie High. I came home on the bus, and I've looked out the window, and his dad's standing at the front gate with this white goat on a tether. And I've got off the bus, and I've looked at him, and I'm going, what's going on, man? He's like, I bought a goat. I'm like, yeah, I can see that. And I said, what's its name? And he goes, Spotty. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's a white goat, so you call it Spotty, you know, great idea. And that sort of explains the sort of person that my dad was. Over the next 5 or 6 years, I really got to know my dad well. You know, we ended up becoming these best mates who had these great conversations. He was such an intelligent person. He was this wise person. And I really appreciated my relationship with him. Not just that, it was really quite bizarre because this goat, Spotty, came to represent his renewed life. And Dad spent so many hours walking around the farm, just dragging Spotty along behind him, that the goat actually used to start following him around the farm. So it was great. Every weekend we'd be there. I'd be off on adventures. I'd come home and here's Dad and Spotty just getting around somewhere, the farm, always having a bit of fun. This one particular day I woke up before school and I've walked down to the paddock and I've gone to move Spotty's tether, and through the night she jumped up into this sapling tree, slipped down, and a leg had got caught and she'd snapped a leg. And when I got down there, I lifted her out of the tree, but I realised straight away that she had died. And I thought straight away, you know, alarm bells rang. I thought, oh, gee, how's Dad going to react to this? And I ran up to the house and I went straight inside and I told Jan, I said, look, Spotty's dead. And he just went straight to the bedroom. And I knew straight away that he was hurt because he didn't even want to see us. About 15 minutes later, he came back out and he goes, look, son, can you stay home and bury Spotty for me? I just can't do it. I've got to go to work. And I said, yeah, Dad, it's fine. Off you go. So I took the day off school. It was a pretty warm day. I've gone down to the paddock. Of course, being the young, stupid fella I was, I didn't take any water or anything. I picked the middle of the paddock, got the shovel out and started digging in the ground. And it was like rock. And after an hour, I was dying of dehydration. It was in the middle of the day. It was just burning. I got the hole to about this deep and I just could not go any further. So I grabbed poor old Spotty and I dragged her over and I put her in the hole and just covered it over with dirt. I've gone up to the house that afternoon. Dad gets home and goes, did you bury her? And I said, yeah. And he goes, did you put a cross up? And I said, oh no, I forgot. I hadn't even thought for a second that he might want a cross so he could actually go down and see the grave. And I said, look, I'll do it tomorrow. He goes, no, mate. It's all right, don't worry about it. 2 weeks to the day later, I was at my girlfriend's place, who happens to be my wife now. She's in the crowd, and her mum, so I was at their place. And I get this phone call, and it was my mother, and she said, "Look, son, your father's had a heart attack. Go straight to the hospital." And she said, "Don't get your hopes up, mate, because it's pretty bad." And, my world crumbled straight away. I thought, gee, this is it, something, this is what's going to happen. I finally get to know this person, I'm going to lose him. I went to the hospital. I'd already called my sister, and she was at the hospital as well. She'd talked to the nurses, and she came out, and she was bawling. And I knew the second I looked at her that Dad was gone. And she shook her head, and I just crumbled to the ground. I finally got to know this person. This is 5 or 6 years of really becoming best mates with this man, and he was gone. And I had no idea, had any inkling at all, that there had been something wrong with him. Well, I was distraught, and I was devastated. And as anyone who's lost someone, you go through this process of just looking for a sign, looking for something. And even though I had told my father that I loved him a lot of times, I still felt like I needed something more. I needed a sign just from him to let me know that, hey, I love you too, son, it's all right. And about 5 or 6 weeks went on, and the season started to change. The farm, the grass turned brown and everything started to die. It was a bit like my mood. It's like as soon as he died, everything started to die as well. About 6 weeks later, I was up the back of the yard. I was feeding the chickens. So I'm up there, I'm throwing around the chicken feed, and I just happened to look down at the paddock. And here is this bright green patch of grass, just perfect round, right in the middle of the paddock. And I just thought, this is it. It's the life. This is the sign I've been waiting for. I just dropped that chicken feed, and I went running down the verge, down the paddock, and the grass is there, and I came straight up, and I just jumped on it. And the second my feet went through the ground, I realised my mistake. There was this big pop, and something went all over my face. By the time my feet hit the bottom of that hole, I was up to about there in Spotty's carcass. Now, you think being waist deep in a goat's carcass is bad. You wait till you smell it. Because the next thing that happened is I went, and I just started vomiting all over myself. Now we've got to get this picture right here, because unfortunately my arms had gone in as well. Now I'm not going to tell you what colour they were, and it was one of the nightmares from the movies where you can't get out of the hole. I was sort of like this, and I kept slipping. I ended up having to grab behind me clumps of grass and drag myself back. Of course, I finally get out of this hole, and I know where the creek is, so I just take a beeline for the creek. I couldn't even breathe because the smell was so horrendous. And I'm bawling my eyes out, because this is the sign from my father. So I did this big bomb dive off the bank, into the water, and I'm just in the water, and I'm washing my legs and stuff. The funny thing is that, when I finally got my head out of the water that day, I swear that I could hear someone laughing. And to me, I received the sign that I was looking for, and that was the sign. Okay. Good morning, I am Dr. Greg Nash, and yes, I'm a lecturer in communication, but as we've said, I'm also a baker, a pastry cook, and a cake decorator, and I never forget where I came from. Now, our stories make us who we are, and we live in a place, this rural community, it's a place of such rich, vibrant stories, such a history of stories, especially with a history like Gympie has got. I'm on this crusade at the moment to get people to embrace public speaking skills. And the thing with public speaking is that story plays a big part in it. Story is so important because story builds trust. Story is what connects you to the audience. I just want to tell you a little bit about my history. One of the first times I ever did public speaking was in 2006. It was fairly important. I was at the Brisbane Writers' Festival. And the reason that I'm telling you this is because I want you to see that learning how to talk is really important. It is a learned skill. So what actually happened with that particular time, I went down there and I was with my wife and my daughters. I was really nervous about it because there were some really important people in the crowd, and I wanted to impress them. I had written a bit of stuff, so I actually had to talk about it. And it was horrific. I was up the front there and I was shaking. I was shaking so much that I couldn't even read what I had written. And of course, the voice was a real issue too. And I'm going to break this down slowly for you. The way that I really knew that I had stuffed it up was because at the end of it, my daughter came up to me and said, "Dad, you sound like you're going to cry." I was like, "Yeah, thanks for that. I feel so much better now." But it dawned on me that, hey, what happened to me? I know how to communicate. I talk to people all the time. I know how to do this. What happened to me when I actually got to the front here? So today my challenge to you is I want to innovate the way that you communicate. I want you to embrace public speaking skills. And as we've seen today, people like to listen to people. And this is really hard because we are all communicators. Believe it or not, we are experts at communication. That's the one profession we all have. We all do it every day from as soon as we wake up till the moment we go to bed. But there's a couple of things that we have to think about here. First of all, in terms of public speaking, we're talking about storytelling here. This really comes back to Aristotle's The Art of Persuasion. Now he has these three main things here: ethos, logos, and pathos. Ethos is the appeal to credibility. Logos is logic. Now, logic always takes the big picture in public speaking. You know, you want to be logical in what you're saying because you don't want to come across as being stupid. You know, you've got to know what you're saying. Ethos, it takes a real back seat. This is credibility. So this is about who am I? What authority do I have to speak on this? What information am I using? And where did I get this information? And then finally there's pathos, and pathos is the big one. And that's the appeal to the emotions of the audience. You know, the appeal to emotion. Now, in public speaking, appeal to emotion is paramount because trust is the big issue here. You want to gain trust with the audience. And storytelling is the best way to appeal to emotion, as you're going to see. The other thing we have to think about is the way we communicate. And the way we communicate in terms of actual communication, 70% of communication is non-verbal. So it's how you actually tell the story. So what I'm going to do here is just look at a couple of little things that I've just noticed with you guys today and with what happens up here. The difference between informal and formal public speaking. Just today I've seen little groups on the breaks outside and you're all in these groups and you're speaking. Some are big groups, some are small groups. I'm just going to let you know right now, that's public speaking. You're out there, you're telling stories to each other, you're talking about your experiences, you are actually doing it. You're doing exactly what I'm doing now, but you're doing it in an informal fashion. What we've got to do is take the communication that happens in that informal realm, and we've got to move it to this formal realm right here. So what might happen out there is you might be talking about the weekend, about your fishing trip, and you're saying, "You should have been there, it was unreal." We're all just sitting there talking, we're on the back of the boat. Next minute he's just like this, he's holding, he's just like this, you know, it was unreal. We're all screaming at him, yahooing, and when he finally got it in, man, this thing was this big. Now if I had seen you actually doing that out there and I walked up to you and said, "Hey, can I get you when I'm doing my speech just to come up and tell that story?" Two things probably would have happened. First, you would have vomited in your mouth because you would have gone, "Oh, well, I'm not going to get up there." And the second thing is if you were going to do it, you would have gone, "Oh, yeah, I suppose I could do that." You would get up here and all of that wonderful communication would abandon you. You'd be gone. What would end up happening is actually you'd get up the front here. Now, we know how beautiful it was out here, but as soon as you stand up here, you look at the crowd and you're sort of like, "Oh, gee," you know, you work out pretty quick. Hey, I put my hands in my pockets, I can hide them. "Oh, this isn't so bad, I can hide something." And it doesn't take too long when you just start talking that if you put one leg in front of the other one, "Well, I can hide one of my legs, this isn't too bad." And so all of a sudden we start crumpling up, you know, I can almost hide my head inside here if I'm doing. And hey, they won't be able to tell how fat I am if I turn sideways. And the voice doesn't work, so it would be, "Yeah, we went fishing on the weekend with my mates and we caught a really big fish, it was fun." You know. So what actually goes on here? We've got to look at a couple of things. Let's break it down a bit. The stance. How do you stand when you're public speaking? Well, the first thing you do is you come out here and you think, "How am I going to stand? I've never been in front of an audience before, this is really bad." So you're not going to sort of, you know, your arms don't know what to do with your arms. Hey, the best thing to do is, you know, spread your legs, stand upright, get your hands, especially if you're nervous because they're going to be shaking loose, clamp them together and pop them in front of you. And this is important, and the reason I'm letting you know this is because voices in the community work. You want to be a good public speaker. So these are easy little skills, subtle things that work. So you can put your hands in front of you. And this isn't too bad. You've got to be careful of Mr. Leg though, because if you're holding all of that nerves in there, Mr. Leg's going to get out the side here and start shaking. But there is a good thing with that too, because your stance is going to work with that. First of all, you'll find with the hands in the middle here, if you do get into a story, and man, they're fantastic because you own these. You know them. Your body knows how to communicate. After a little while, you'll start talking, and one hand will pop out here, and then the other hand. All of a sudden, you're conducting the orchestra, and you haven't even realised it happened. The fish was this big. It's great. But the other thing is, maybe small movements. And you'll notice if you actually watch this, whether it's online or something of me, I've gone all over the place. I've used this whole space here. It's great for your nervous energy. I'm a little bit nervous, but these subtle little movements here, they actually change your focus of where you are. The other thing here is your gestures. How do you move your arms, your face? You've got to be careful you don't get like floppy arms all the way out there. So not too pronounced, but just nice small ones. Kevin Rudd, he used to have his little pointer. The pointer's great, to actually have the pointer there, a bit of this and a bit of that. You make a big point, you get the one finger in there because that's a big one and this is a big one. So they actually, they work really well as well. But it's also that positive affirmation. You want people to agree with you, so you look at them and you nod your head. I can tell you right now, if you're looking at the audience going like this, they're not going to look back at you and go. They're going to nod with you as well because you're really trying to get them on board with what you're saying. Our other big one is what we call paralinguistics, all the properties of the voice, the tone, the pitch, the volume, even things like a pause in what you're saying. This is so important. When I talked about my father dying, I didn't say, oh yeah, my father died that day, I was really sad, and I just kept going. I slowed it right down. You could hear it in my voice. This is where the emotion comes from. And then at the end when I said he died, there was this pause there. Anyone who's felt that, you're reflecting on it. That pause is communicating so much. It's a nice, steady pace, and it keeps the audience involved with what you're actually saying as well. So this is another really good point. My final point for public speaking, and again, I really hope you think about this because you are expert communicators, is eye contact. This is what creates trust. Do you know what this does? It lets people know that you want them to hear what you have to say. So it actually makes it an intimate process, and it creates trust, it creates warmth, and this is the actual rapport that you want to build with the audience, because trust is everything. You want them to believe what you're going to say. At this particular point, I think I should wrap up. So I really want to say to you, this is my crusade. Innovate the way that you communicate. You are a public speaker. You just don't realise that you have to move it from the informal through to the formal and have a big voice in a small community. Thank you very much.